He had many names: Don Pablo, El Padrino, El Patron, and many more, all pointing to one thing: power. Who would have thought that the great and infamous Pablo Escobar would one day fall? Certainly not us. In a stunning turn of events, the era of infamy and dread ended as the notorious and infamous Colombian drug lord Pablo Escobar was caught and killed.
Drug lord Pablo Escobar was killed today, 16 months after his escape from prison.
Escobar, a figure of immense notoriety, gained incredible wealth and power in the 1980s, becoming one of the most affluent individuals globally. He wrought havoc, resulting in innumerable deaths, including prominent officials, law enforcement personnel, and innocent civilians. But despite his ruthless actions, Escobar remained a beloved figure in his home country of Colombia, where he was seen as a Robin Hood-like figure who helped the poor and marginalized. The world was seized by shock when news came out in 1993 that El Patron had not only been found, but had also been killed in a police shootout. The events that followed were dire and tense, and his funeral became one of the most significant events in the country's history. This one funeral drew out thousands of mourners from all over Colombia, made the news, and traveled across the world like wildfire. Don Pablo is dead. But would it really have been a befitting burial for a man of his stature if there wasn't some dark, shady drama? The question here is, what really happened at Pablo Escobar's funeral? Well, sit back, relax, and listen to how we unravel all the details for you. Before we dive into the funeral itself, it's important to understand the events leading up to it. Pablo Escobar was born on December 1st, 1949, in Rio Negro, Colombia, and grew up in the city of Medellin. Escobar was the founder and leader of the Medellin cartel, which was responsible for smuggling vast amounts of cocaine into the United States and other countries. Escobar began his criminal career in the late 1970s, working as a small-time smuggler and dealer. However, he quickly rose through the ranks of the Colombian drug trade, and by the mid-1980s, he was one of the wealthiest and most powerful men in the world. At the height of his power, Escobar's cartel was estimated to be responsible for up to 80% of the cocaine smuggled into the United States. Such was the magnitude of his criminal empire that his financial fortunes eclipsed those of most other elites, as he accrued a rumored net worth of $30 billion. Escobar's reign of terror began to unravel in the early 1990s as the Colombian government began to crack down on drug trafficking. The US government, which had been pressuring the Colombian government to take action against drug trafficking, also became involved in the fight against the cartels. In 1991, the Colombian government enacted a new constitution that allowed for the extradition of Colombian citizens to the United States for drug-related crimes. This was a major blow to Escobar, who had previously been able to evade prosecution by operating within the confines of the Colombian legal system. In response to the new extradition laws, Escobar declared war on the Colombian government. He ordered a series of bombings and assassinations, targeting government officials, judges, and journalists who he believed was working against him. The violence escalated, with car bombings and shootouts becoming a common occurrence in Medellin. The Colombian government responded with a massive manhunt for Escobar. They formed a special unit known as the Search Block to track down and capture the drug lord. The Search Block was aided by U.S. intelligence and military forces who provided training and equipment. Despite the government's efforts, Escobar remained elusive. He continued to evade capture, using his vast wealth to bribe government officials and law enforcement officers. He also maintained a network of loyal supporters who helped him to move around undetected. The government was exasperated, because how exactly would they catch a ghost? Well, lucky for them, Pablo Escobar didn't remain a ghost for long. Escobar's shocking death. In the last month of 1993, however, Escobar's luck ran out. Escobar had been on the run for over a year after escaping from a high-security prison in July 1992. His escape was a spectacular feat that involved bribing prison guards, constructing a tunnel underneath the prison, and even building a fake guard tower to fool the authorities. He was able to evade capture for months, despite being one of the most wanted men in the world. However, the CIA have been tracking Escobar's family and associates for some time. They had infiltrated the Medellin cartel and had gathered a lot of intelligence on Escobar's movements. When they couldn't find Escobar, they decided to focus their attention on his family. The CIA was able to monitor Escobar's family and had them under surveillance. They intercepted all communication between Escobar and his family, which made it difficult for him to communicate with them. However, in December 1993, Escobar wanted to speak to his son Juan Pablo one last time. Perhaps he knew he was at the end of his long, treacherous, and bloody road. This was a fatal mistake for the drug lord. The security forces traced the call and located Escobar's hideout. On that same day, the Colombian police, with the help of the American DEA, launched a massive search operation to capture Escobar. They found him hiding in a safe house in Medellin. Escobar made attempts to escape, but he was shot and killed by the police. His death was a significant victory for the Colombian government and the American DEA after years of precarious hide and seek. It was also a moment of mixed feelings for the Colombian people. On one hand, their dark Robin Hood had been murdered, yet on the other hand, they had also suffered from years of violence and drug trafficking brought on by this one man and his organization. The news of Escobar's death spread quickly, and soon the radio stations were playing Viva Colombia, a song that symbolized the country's fight against drug trafficking. Soldiers were heard chanting, "We just killed Pablo Escobar," in the streets, and a new fear of what would happen next hung heavy in the streets. After Escobar's death, his family was left to deal with the aftermath. They had lost a husband, father, and brother, but they also had to contend with the fact that they were now the targets of revenge attacks from Escobar's former associates. Escobar's family decided to hold a private funeral for Escobar, but they faced a difficult challenge in doing so. Escobar was one of the most wanted men in the world, and his funeral would be a target for both law enforcement and his enemies. The funeral drama. The world was eager to see what would happen at Escobar's funeral. The ceremony itself was a chaotic affair, marked by violence, global attention, and controversy. The funeral took place in the city of Medellin, Escobar's hometown and the heart of his criminal empire. Thousands of people gathered to pay their respects to the drug lord, including many of his loyal followers and members of his family. However, the sheer size of the crowd quickly became a problem, as people fought for just a glimpse of the casket or to even get closer to the procession. According to some estimates, around 25,000 people attended the funeral, with some reports suggesting that the number could have been much higher. As Escobar's wife, son, and daughter attempted to make their way to the funeral, they found themselves blocked by the crowds of people surrounding the event. Despite their best efforts, they could not even open the doors of the car they were riding in, and ultimately had to turn back, missing the burial altogether. This chaotic scene was a stark reminder of the power and influence that Escobar had wielded in his lifetime. The military police were out in full force at the funeral, armed with rifles and ready to maintain order. They conducted extensive body searches on mourners, spectators, and reporters to intercept any outbursts of aggression or disruptions. Nevertheless, these stringent measures failed to discourage the immense throngs of individuals who were fervently determined to bid farewell to Escobar. In fact, a few of them even made bold attempts to breach the police barricades and infiltrate the burial site, loudly proclaiming their unwavering allegiance to the late kingpin with fervent cries of "Long live Escobar." The army troops were additionally summoned to assist in managing the throngs of people, guaranteeing that Escobar's corpse could be transported to its final resting place without any untoward events. The burial ceremony was hastily executed, with a Catholic clergyman making an effort to recite some prayers before surrendering due to the unruly behavior of the crowd. Escobar's mother and several of his sisters watched quietly as the body was lowered into the ground, their grief and loss compounded by the chaos of the funeral itself. After his funeral, many people felt uneasy about the sheer scale of the support for a man who had caused so much harm and destruction. However, for others, the event only cemented their belief that Escobar was a hero and a martyr, and they continued to honor his memory in the years to come. Challenges and controversies faced. The challenges surrounding his funeral centered on his notoriety and the political implications of his death. Some argued that giving him a lavish funeral would glorify his criminal activities and send a wrong message to society. Others believed that his family had the right to mourn his death like any other person. The controversy surrounding the funeral also raised political questions. Some accused the government of allowing Escobar to be buried in his hometown to appease his supporters and gain political points. Others argued that the government had no choice but to allow the funeral to proceed because of the law. However, in all, Pablo Escobar's funeral was a complex and controversial event that raised questions about justice, politics, and morality. While some believed that he should have been buried in secret to avoid glorifying his criminal activities, others argued that he deserved a proper funeral as a human being. Regardless of one's opinion, the funeral remains a significant event in the history of Colombia. and the war on drugs. In an interview with CBS in Washington, Gabriel Silva, the Colombian ambassador to the United States, conveyed a highly potent message to drug lords through his statement on Escobar's death. The message was clear: surrender or face the ultimate consequence of being killed. Silva's words reflected the Colombian government's resolute determination to take uncompromising steps in their fight against the drug trade, even if it meant resorting to forceful actions against non-compliant drug lords. Also, during an interview, Thomas Cash, the Miami-based boss of the U.S. Drug Enforcement Administration, made a startling claim about the Medellin cartel. According to Cash, the cartel's days were numbered now that its notorious leader, Pablo Escobar, was no longer in the picture. Cash's assertion implies that without Escobar's leadership and ruthlessness, the cartel would be unable to maintain its grip on the drug trade and would inevitably fade into obscurity. In a stunning and yet another controversial move, President Cesar Gaviria bestowed the esteemed Medal of Valor, the highest accolade in law enforcement, upon the very security forces responsible for the death of Escobar. This bold and daring act paid tribute to the unwavering courage and selflessness of those who put their lives on the line to take down one of the most infamous drug kingpins the world has ever seen. That's all for today, folks. Thanks for taking the time and patience to watch and listen to everything in the video up to this point. Please like and share the video, and subscribe to our channel for more interesting updates similar to this. See you all next time.